Oh, I wish I was telekinetic.
Is your coffee out of reach?
My Kleenex is.
Mea culpa audio repair. Hey everyone, it's Adam. I'm just stopping by to offer this public service announcement. You see, it's only our second episode, and we've had a bit of a goof. Instead of recording my audio with my mic, I accidentally recorded it all with a rotary telephone. Common mistake, Jesse Brown does it all the time. Anyhow, Chris, our producer, and his production elves have been tinkering away to restore it, and they did the best they could. However, it does sound a little tinny. Even so, just thought it would be best to give you that little word of warning that my audio is not the greatest this time. And the only way to make sure that I learn my lesson is to rate us 5 stars on iTunes. Anyhow, I now present you with It's Just a Show, Episode 2, already in progress.
Okay, so ordinarily we would do follow-up here on this portion of It's Just a Show, but we haven't actually released episode 1 into the wilderness yet.
We're recording this a few days before we release the first episode, so there really hasn't been much of a follow-up yet. The last time we talked about whether we were Team Joel or Team Mike, and we mentioned a bit about how we first started watching the show. So, Adam, you started with the movie, didn't you?
Yes, but I don't think you mentioned how you got into the show as a Canadian.
As a Canadian. Well, I wasn't supposed to, but...
It was verboten.
My family has always been a big fan of gray market materials. Like, we had the VCR that records the other VCR to get our own copies of rented movies.
Me too, yeah.
We had one of those massive satellite dishes in our backyard. Like, it was a 10-foot span. It was like a radio telescope. It would physically, move to find the satellite in orbit, and it would connect to the channel that way. So that is the way we got American TV.
Do you recall, the first episode that you saw?
The first episode I saw was Bride of the Monster. It was just on in the background when we had visitors over, and it was the opening sequence where they're looking at Crow's dreams. And so I was looking at it, and I was just, is this a kid's show? Because it had puppets. And I thought, is this some kind of Muppets ripoff? And then they go into his dream, and Crow's having an erotic dream about Tom Servo in a Candy Striper uniform. And then I was instantly like, oh, this is not for kids. And that was really funny. And so I ignored our guests and watched the movie. And then I was hooked.
Now, you said that your family was super into gray market stuff. I want to know, how many purple shirt Bart Simpson dolls and shirts did you have?
Didn't quite go that far, but I mean, we did get proper channels that we did actually have to buy subscriptions for, but you would just get random feeds off of television test patterns that I guess networks were pushing out to their affiliates. So it would just be test pattern, and then they start to show a whole bunch of random shows that they were giving out. For instance, I saw all of the sitcom Empty Nest in one go because they were just showing all the feeds of it.
Oh, my cup runneth over.
Yeah, so I got acquainted with a lot of 80s and 90s sitcoms through my satellite dish that I otherwise don't think I would have watched, but sometimes when we didn't have a subscription, that was the only thing that available.
Wait a minute, did you watch all 5 seasons of Empty Nest? Were you afraid to leave the television? They might stop airing it.
This is the thing, when you're a kid, you'll watch anything. So, Adam, you started with the movie, and then you started to get into tape trading.
Yeah, I kind of fell into tape trading and, bootleg tapes and such when I was super, super young and just trying to figure stuff out. I was an obsessive, nerdy kid, and which really makes me stand out from the rest of you cool dudes recording this podcast.
My only tape trading was in Dragon Ball Z, so... I know.
Excuse me, do you have these subtitle editions, please?
None of those dubs.
Yeah, it's I can't stand these Canadian voice actors. But yeah, I got involved in tape trading because when I was when I was a really, really little kid, one of the things that I would do for fun is I would obsessively parse over movie reviews. I would like asked for like those big compendium books.
I remember those.
Yeah, like Leonard Maltin's book. Big fan of Laser Blast, that guy. And my paternal grandparents had like Leonard Maltin Movie Guide 1988, and then I discovered that they had them going all the way back to like the early 80s. So I would just obsessively go over these and look for movies, and look particularly for like weird movies that would be hard to find. And I was such a stickler and a purist. I remember a movie that I was really excited to see based on the reviews that I read in Roger Ebert's book, the reviews I read in all the other movie guides, for a little movie called Reanimator. And as a young boy, I could not find it anywhere. And I went to the local mall, and one flea market, they actually had it for like only like $3, which in like the early 90s for a VHS tape for a rare movie is actually really good.
Yeah.
Now it's overpriced. But I looked at the tape and I like studied it, and I was like, wait a minute, this version is rated R. I was warned that the R-rated version was not only censored, but had new footage added, which ruined the pace of the film. I will not watch this. And I put it down. I was 12 years old. Why did I have this rigid worldview?
Because you were 12.
Yeah, I think that's true. We're all like super extreme when we're kids.
So where did you grow up, Adam?
Oh, I grew up in Newfoundland, so I was pretty remote from Mystery Science.
Well, that's just it. Like, I also grew up in rural Ontario, so getting things physically was very tough to do. You had to wait until you were going on a trip to the city, or you had to rely on mail. And I think we're really exposing just how old we are in this discussion. But I had a similar thing for Björk singles. I became really obsessive about collecting them all. It's so funny because it's just so easy to get now that there's no point in trying to track them all down and being really thorough about it.
Well, that's the super weird thing, is that you can get everything you want right now. If you want to see a movie, if you want to listen to an album, finding it is not that difficult. But in my day, like, I sent a self-addressed envelope to like total strangers, and I was a little kid. And I guess this is like the advantage of having latchkey parents who don't care what you do. This is the advantage of being raised by a VCR instead of people. I mailed out these envelopes, and I would get these catalogs, and then this is actually fairly reckless, but I would not eat my lunches. I would just take the lunch money and save it for sometimes weeks on end, and send money to buy tapes. This was when I was in grade school. So by the time I started getting into Mystery Science, when the first tapes were released when I was about 11, 12, or 13, shortly after the movie came out, and those Rhino tapes started, I was hooked. Like, I remember when on the very first fan site that I found, because as soon as I saw the movie, I had to use my dial-up internet to search for Mystery Science.
For me, it was Deep Space Nine.
Did you ask Jeeves, where can I find pictures of Benjamin Sisko?
It took a really long time to load them in, too.
That's true. I remember as part of being a young boy with an internet connection, is that the very second thing that I printed off was a Playboy cheesecake picture of Jenny McCarthy, noted anti-vaxxer. The first thing I printed off was an animation cell from Ren and Stimpy. And that was one day. That was the same day.
Just this collage of male adolescence. This time we watched Danger! Death Ray. That was from season 6, and it's episode 20. It starts with a bunch of besuited NATO representatives who enter a highly secure compound to bear witness to the capabilities of a souped-up viewfinder, the titular Death Ray. The lead scientist begins his demonstration of the device, which cuts through a sheet of metal with the brutal, destructive power of a run-of-the-mill welding torch. Oh, and for people out there, I know the difference between a cutting torch and a welding torch. It's just joke flow, people. Then, shocker! A couple dudes in attendance are secretly baddies. They gas the premises and abscond with both scientists and Death Ray, escaping via a vehicular one-upmanship. First a car, then a helicopter, then a submarine, each more fakey looking than the last. All this to one of the grooviest soundtracks we have yet experienced in the show. We then cut to our Studley hero Bart Fargo, a secret agent who reluctantly cancels his vacation to uncover the Purloined WMD. After more or less dry humping his boss's secretary, he jet sets to Barcelona, beats up some people, goes to a bar, beats up some more people, runs away from them, and drops in, literally, on a pretty artist lady named Lucille, who appreciates a man who's good at breaking, but even better at entering. Back to spy stuff. Barty Farg then proceeds to drive and crash a sports car, not shoot a guy, sex a blonde, get almost blowed up in a motorboat, crash a party with the guy he didn't shoot, and do a lot of property damage to a Spanish villa. He simultaneously recovers both the MacGuffin and Lucille, who was kidnapped and put in the same room for some reason. The movie concludes with fart embargo and his love canoodling while he hangs up on his boss's needy secretary by dropping his communicator watch into a pool twice.
In the intro, Mike Nelson removes Crow's soft contact lenses, which is the closest this show comes to Lucio Fulci levels of eye horror. After the break, Servo lands a sneaker endorsement deal thanks to his new agent, TV's Frank. Budding screenwriter Crow tries to get Frank's agency to represent him, but Frank's become a Hollywood phony and dismisses the robots Earth vs. Soup and untitled Peter Graves at the University of Minnesota project scripts. Frank promises Mike a role in Anything Goes, and Mike ditches his jumpsuit for a sailor suit. In the second segment, Tom invents a peaceful death ray, but can't resist blasting Crow to smithereens. Segment 3 has Mike guesting on Servo's revamped This Is Your Life, but the only familiar voice they can get is Crow. Segment 4 sees Crow trying and failing to sell the womany Italian sunglasses seen in the film. In the final segment, Cambot weeps for cameras destroyed in the movie. A fan letter asks why you can't see through Servo's dome head in the theater. Servo's answer?
Chuck, it's because of physics.
And Dr. F tells Frank his glamour shots are slutty.
Did you like this episode, Adam?
I would say overall, I like this episode. It's not one of the all-time greats of Mystery Science Theater 3000, but I have a real soft spot for all of the Euro spy, Euro crime movies, and this is definitely one of them. It's got a great soundtrack, some good goofs, and I really liked the host segments with Frank as an agent. What about you, Beth?
Meh. It's not a very memorable episode, either the movie or the goofs. It's not one of the worst, but it's quite forgettable. And I should mention that in the Amazing Colossal episode guide, this is one of the shortest entries. I think the writers found it kind of a forgettable episode too, and I honestly don't feel like they brought their A-grade material to this episode. I found the plot, as probably my summary kind of summarized, incomprehensible. And at a certain point, I just checked out and was just looking at the backgrounds and what the people were wearing, and I found that strangely mesmerizing because it's a strange mix of like 60s high mod fashion and old European Rococo flourishes, and they come together really effectively in the final scene in the Spanish villa. I don't know how to describe it except if Prince, God rest his sexy soul, was into pink instead of purple, this is what his house would have looked like. It is pink madness, and it makes no sense, but it is quite a sight to behold. If you need a reason to stick to the end for this movie, it is that pink villa. Other than that, like the women's costumes especially really caught my eye. Like, it's just the most stylish 60s you can get. Like big hair, giant circular earrings, really, really chunky jewelry, and the boldest patterns on the dresses. My particular favorite was Lucille's first dress, which is kind of, it's like a disco ball effect. And the secretary, the poor cast aside secretary, she's wearing like a hibiscus floral number that is really nice to look at. The men, of course, are not meant to be paraded in such a fashion, but they had some interesting things that they were wearing as well. Chris and I were trying to figure out the make of Bart's watch. Bart's watch is supposed to obviously evoke James Bond's famous watch, and it was some kind of European make, but we weren't able to track it down. I also tried to figure out what red sports car that was. I even got my dad on it. My dad's a huge car guy. He's owned more than 100 cars in his lifetime. and he could not figure out what it was either from the clips. If you recognize either the make of the watch or the sports car, please write in. We would be interested in knowing that. I should also say, like, Barcelona itself, the shots of Barcelona are gorgeous, except for one notable exception, which our producer Chris pointed out, where the establishing shot for Barcelona is an industrial wasteland. And the Hotel Ari Casa, which is heavily featured in this movie, apparently was a very swanky hotel that started to decline shortly after this movie was made. Perhaps they cursed it. And it finally closed in 1977. So yeah, I'm not a particular fan of the 60s fashion, but I think for all the things that this movie did badly, the design actually was striking in a lot of ways. I really want to shout out the red and teal waiting room in the secret bunker at the beginning of the film, not only for its beautiful red modular furniture, but this amazing Art Deco light in the background. I'd really like to know what that is. But so the movie itself, as I said, does not really get me. But if you're a fan of design, I think this movie is worth checking out.
Yeah, I think I would agree there. And I think that when you watch a lot of Italian movies from this period, I think depending on the talent of the director, it's really a matter of style overcoming comparatively much smaller budgets to the American and British cinema industries that were around at the time. So you have like much cheaper Italian movies and like a really strong like visual director, someone like say Mario Bava, who would go on to direct Mystery Science Experiment, Danger Diabolik. He is an extremely stylish director who could make a lot with very, very little, and was noted for his like particular use of like intense purples and greens. And in this movie, it's more like, hey, that's a cool lamp. Now back to boredom.
So if you want to watch this movie with an eye for its design, don't go off the YouTube version. It is very bad quality. And even if you look for alternative downloads, they're not good quality either. The best way to get this is the Shout Factory version online, and they're generously streaming their Mystery Science Theater 3000 properties. Even in Canada, our consumer backwater where we can't get anything good, we can even access it. So that would be the way to watch it.
Yeah, and I should add there too, like we'll have the link for that in our show notes, but all of those episodes are streaming for free, so this isn't like an Amazon Prime thing. You don't have to pay anything.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. Thank you, Shout Factory.
Shout Factory, not currently sponsoring the show.
Should we not give them free advertising then? I think it's pretty rad of them to go out there and do that.
It is.
Is there a particular moment in this movie or episode that you found tickled your funny bone more than others?
Yeah, my favorite moment, and the thing that made me laugh the most, is a repeated kind of thing in the show where, okay, so Danger Death Ray has some of the worst miniature effects ever captured on film.
They're incredible.
It's not even that the models and the toys really are that bad. It's just that they're shot in such and such a way. Like some of them are even shot from like an aerial view. So they're made to look as small as possible, which is not how you shoot miniatures.
And it also looks like it's done in somebody's bathtub. Like it literally looks like they just filled a blue bucket with water and shot from that. Yeah.
And it's in fact like when the submarine first shows up, and you can kind of hear Trace Ballou in particular cracking up. And he says my favorite line of the episode where when we first see the submarine, he goes, "Special effects by Billy." What about you?
All right, so my favorite is a scene where one of the baddies in a lovely powder blue bellhop uniform comes in very sinisterly, says, "Your breakfast, senor." And then you get a shot of the breakfast food, and he unfurls the napkin like he's about to do a magic trick to reveal the gun underneath, as if we didn't already know it was there. And then there's a fight scene where he gets hit in the face, and Bart Fargo rips off the beard as if we didn't already see that it was very much a fake beard, to reveal an even faker looking scar. And then at some point he jumps out the window, and the line he says that Bart Fargo says when he sees him plummet to his death is, "That's too bad."
That's too bad.
And then of course Mike and the bots are like, "What? That is the perfect opportunity to say something really quippy like,
oh, come on. What about he really fell for me?
Oh, Oh, wait, or something like, it was nice of you to drop in. Even I can come up with something for that. So, Adam, I know that you were really interested in Frank's talent agency at the beginning host sequence. Do you have any experience with talent agencies?
Do I ever? Ever since I was a very, very little kid, I was interested in performing. And somewhere in the vaults of the local cable access of Cable 9 in Newfoundland, there's definitely footage of me performing in children's television plays where I'm showing off my super cool rat tail.
Oh my god. Somebody needs to find that.
I used to have a VHS copy of it. I have no idea what happened to it. All I remember is, okay, I was super young. I was around, like, I think 7 years old when this one was recorded. But I found a tape of a play that was done in the early 90s that was called The King Who Needed a Wife. And I was not directed to do this, but kept doing it anyway. At the ends of certain lines, clearly I thought they were funny, so I kept turning to the camera to deliver them. So, yeah, I was always really, really interested. And so I've done some, like, stage work and training. Naturally, I was like, well, I'm gonna get involved in acting. I'm gonna be a big star. And after sending out my, like, resume and everything, I got contacted by a talent agency, which I will not name, in Toronto. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, this could be it. I could be booking commercials. And from then, who knows? I arrived there. And one of the things that I had done is I had actually, like, emailed a friend of mine, though, just to be on the safe side, because a lot of talent agencies are, fly-by-night talent agencies in quotation marks, and they are taking advantage of hopeful young dopes who have their money or their parents' money to throw, and then they close up shop and leave town.
Oh, okay, well, that was a little less sinister than I thought the place you were going, so...
Yeah, it was actually held in an abandoned warehouse. But no, there was... so, like, in this tall building, there was this supposed talent agency, which didn't actually have, like, any kind of markings on the door, so that's a fairly suspicious sign. And if I had emailed a friend of mine if he had heard anything about it, because he had signed to an agency and, like, knew a few, and he had never heard of it. So I went in anyway, but...
Oh, that sounds so scary, Adam.
Yeah, like, in hindsight, perhaps I wouldn't do it today.
Did you go by yourself, or were your parents with you?
No, perhaps I should have contacted a block parent. But I didn't. I just went in. You know what? I say that, it's like, ooh, that is reckless. But you know what? I don't think about things like that until someone brings that up. That's the sort of foolhardy person that I am. I just go, that sounds fun. It's either going to be the best day of my life, or I'm just going to meet with a local con artist for half an hour. But I walk in, they explain, oh, we're really interested in guys like you. This is how our system works. You get your pictures, you get your headshots up, and then you're listed with your age and body type. And then people contact us to hire you based on a roster of talent. It's very, very legit, let me assure you. And they had suggested that the headshots that I had, which were taken by a professional photographer, needed to be updated. And they were just a couple of years old. And here's what they did. Now, you can get someone but on your own, but what we'd really recommend, and what, if you want to be with an agency like us, you really got to do this, is to hire one of our photographers for $650 to get a couple of headshots. And then I was like, oh man, I can't wait. I just got to go down to the bank and I'll get you $650.
Oh no, you fell for it.
No, I just told them that.
Okay. I was going to say, like, you suddenly became really gullible in that one moment.
Yeah, one of the straps on my overalls came undone, and I said, "Gorge, I'm going to be in pictures." So I asked them. It's like, wow, yeah, I'll definitely go down and get that $650. I just gotta wait for a little while. I'm meeting someone. So do you mind if I just wait out in the lobby? And they're like, sure. And I'm like, wow, you must have been really impressed by the tape I sent you. And they go, oh yes, we saw your tape. It was very good. And that was, again, a clincher. I had sent them nothing.
You were actually very savvy about all of this.
You can't out-con someone who is a bigger con artist than you. And I was the bigger con that day. So I went out into their lobby and I saw that they had what was then a relatively new and fancy thing, a Keurig coffee machine. And I had no coffee that day. And I had several books in my backpack. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to take advantage of all this free coffee and finish at least one of these books on this extremely comfortable leather couch in this office while I pretend to wait for my friend and my $650 transfer.
I was going to ask if you just like egged the door on your way out, but I think your approach was much more elegant.
I really thought that was going to end with you stealing the coffee maker.
Bye.
Which is weird. I have a photo of me doing that very thing when I won a Keurig coffee maker in a comedy contest 4 years ago.
Oh, wow. Full circle. So you did have glamour shots done.
Yes and no. You ever have one of those things where you joke about something with your friends and then you're not sure if it's a joke anymore? I had that with glamour shots because when we were all in theater school way, way back when, getting our headshots done, we would call them glamour shots because they kind of were in a way. The backgrounds in a lot of headshots from the early 2000s still had some of those like weird starry Sears portrait studio background.
Or the lasers?
Yeah, it's like you're standing either in front of a light bright or a 1980s Doctor Who title sequence. We would call them glamour shots, and after a while, I was like, wait, are those actually called glamour shots? I had to like look it up. And on the Wikipedia entry for glamour shots, you'll be pleased to know there's a lot of people like coquettishly hiding their genitals behind their hands, including the popular Rolling Stone arm bra pose, where someone goes, oh, I don't have a shirt on, but my breasts won't be seen today. So yes and no, I had these shots that all of our, all the actors that I was with there, called glamour shots, and we had those taken, and those were taken very early in theater school for me, and I look very different now. So when I went to that talent agency, their comments about updating it didn't really apply. But later on, yeah, I bear no resemblance to my early 20s self, and one thing I have to say is that I ended up giving away my very last head/glamour shot.
Okay.
It was a few years ago now. I'm sure you're familiar with the most awkward part of breaking up with someone. Not the hardest part. The hardest part is obviously that conversation.
Right.
But the awkward part is where you have to collect your things.
Get your shit back. Yep.
Yeah, it's your last day at the office.
My last one, I got my sister to do it.
Oh, nice. I wish I had done that. So I went by my ex-girlfriend's house, and I was collecting what few items there that I didn't take for when I was moving in with my pals, and we had ended our relationship. And it was still pretty raw. It was like the day after. So I'm collecting my things. I'm trying to just do that as peacefully as possible. And she comes at me with tears in her eyes, and she says, is it okay if I have that comic book you worked on? And I sort of thought about it. There's a comic book that I wrote that a friend of mine drew, and we recorded a fake read-along audiobook on CD for it. And I thought, you know what? I still think, well, this person, she can have this. She always really liked it. Sure, why not? I give it to her. And then a few, the tears keep coming, and she stops me. I'm still in the door, and she goes, wait, can I have your headshot?
Aww.
But here's the thing. When she and I were dating, I never resembled the man in that headshot. It's as though she wanted the Harlequin romance version of me kept as a better memory than our relationship.
Might be effective then.
Maybe. Although maybe she'll always regret leaving that wonderful hunk that no longer exists.
So she got two things. She got the comic book and the glamour shot?
That's right, but she asked for a third, and one I refused to part with. So she was actually a huge Misty. And one of the things that we watched on one of our first dates was actually the MST3K poopy tape, which, hey, it's not a weird thing for anyone who doesn't know. It's not a weird scat thing. That's the name of their blooper reel.
And it's fantastic.
Oh, it's really, really funny. And there's a lot of stuff, actually, and this is one of the reasons why I want to bring it up. There's a lot of stuff with danger death ray, like the host segments with Crow getting damaged, either being burned alive by the death ray or getting his eyes ripped out during the soft contact lenses, in which Trace Beaulieu screams, Oedipus! Which is probably my favorite moment on the tape. She had asked me, it's like, you know what? Can I have the poopy tape?
no.
Which, as ridiculous as that sounds now, imagine a woman crying on your chest as she says that muffled into your shirt.
Oh no.
And I looked down, the purple tape that Rhino released is plainly visible, and I really don't want to give it to her. So I said, totally, but you know what? I think that's at my mom's place, so I can't give it to you. And then I quietly weaseled out, and I somehow felt worse walking out than when I told her we had to break up.
Oh my gosh.
Hey Beth, do you know what your spy name is? Because I've discovered from this movie that you get your spy name by using the name of your favorite Simpsons character and the name of your favorite Coen Brothers movie, hence Bart Fargo. What would be your spy name?
Oh, it's gonna be a mouthful.
No, go ahead.
Mo Hudsucker.
I was going to be Lionel Hudsucker.
Sorry, man.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad we were of one mind on that. But on that note, Bart Fargo. Is he more of like a stylish, cool ladies' man, the 007?
It was interesting for me to enter into this movie because it's a ripoff of James Bond movies, which is a genre I'm already not a particular fan of. I do not enjoy James Bond. Weirdly enough, I have to thank this movie for making me realize why I don't like it, because there's no plot and it's so incoherent, so that it's just a series of cliches that are thrown together, and it just kind of exposes what raw male fantasy James Bond is, where you're a hunky guy, all the ladies are sexually accessible and they're beautiful, and you get all the cars and you can beat up all the dudes and you get to go to the most luxurious places on the most whiz-bang vehicles, and it's just like that's all it is. And the fight sequences, especially like the karate chops, really got to me. But I did think it was interesting that they put in the actor Gordon Scott, who's a lot beefier than, I would say, than Sean Connery. I should mention that this movie came out in 1967. There had been 4 Bond films at that point, so the formula was quite well in place by the time this movie came out for Bond. And they didn't really go with a Bond-esque figure. They went with Gordon Scott, whose background is in Tarzan movies, actually. So he played Tarzan in the 50s, and then he was afraid of being typecast as Tarzan. So he went to Italy, where he ended up doing a bunch of sword and sandal epics. And he was actually buddies with Steve Reeves, who we all know and love from his many Hercules movies on MST3K. So it got me thinking about how you don't see this type of... It seems weird to talk about bodies and what bodies go in and out of fashion in the decades. But it's certainly the case, and we'll see it in Catalina Caper, that women's bodies, like the wasp waist was something you saw a lot more in the 60s. And you don't see a lot of really like well-built kind of bodybuilder men, and this is kind of the exception. But interestingly enough, and friend of the show, Michael Collins, found this out for me, Steve Reeves was actually... He was approached to play James Bond, and he turned down the role because it didn't pay enough. So they actually originally imagined a much more kind of alpha male-esque body type for that role. And in a weird way, it's coming back to that in this knockoff.
That would make a lot of sense in regards to adapting the character from the books. Of course, it's been commented elsewhere that the movie James Bond and the character from the novels aren't exactly the same. Or at least, I think the movies present James Bond, for the most part, up until fairly recently, as like a lovable fantasy, with very few dips into realism. But he is portrayed in the books as like a cold-blooded killer who hates his job, but is also, that's all that he does. So he kind of spends most of his time either cooking and trying not to think about the people he's killed, or killing people.
Oh my gosh.
And having someone who is more physically imposing would perhaps like give the impression it's like, yeah, this is a guy who can kill very easily and has done it a bunch of times. And might explain why like Daniel Craig is kind of Steve Reeves level muscular.
It would also explain what I think this movie really revealed to me about the Bonds films, is it makes being a spy just like an upper class fun excursion. Like, he doesn't actually do too much that seems all that onerous. He gets to spend time in glamorous hotels. He takes a lot of time out to just have sex with random women who have nothing to do with his case. At least he thinks so. But at least physically, they seem to be going back to the original books. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think the appeal of the James Bond movies and all of the knockoffs is that it's a travelogue. So you're being presented with these exotic locales. The actresses in particular, like, are made to look as glamorous as possible. And then you have those stylized and ridiculously sexualized opening sequences with a pop song. And like, so it's all about sensuality and excess. And I think that struck a nerve. And in a weird way, like how Star Wars and Star Trek like never seem to die. Like James Bond never really dies either. And I think it strikes a chord that like still hits something with like mainstream audiences. And I know that James Bond was certainly really popular in Italy at this time because the whole genre, booming from the success of Dr. No and From Russia with Love, got dubbed in Italy as Kiss Kiss Bang Bang movies.
Is that where that phrase comes from?
Yes, and James Bond was often dubbed Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and this became so kind of well-known and well-established that rather than the title track for Thunderball thing, because they thought that would make a terrible name for a song, but they went ahead and recorded one with Tom Jones anyway. But originally they recorded a ballad called Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang that was ultimately unused in the film.
Very interesting. Also interesting, the Italian angle on this is why, strongly built actors got more of a career out in Italy, because Gordon Scott, who I should say was born Gordon Wurschkel, and Steve Reeves, who I think is Scottish, they had to go to Italy to get their acting careers launched. And just an interesting note about what bodies were kind of in style for men in the 50s and 60s. You don't get really heavily built men, and maybe the first time you really see that is in Streetcar Named Desire with Marlon Brando, and he deliberately worked out in a way to build up his upper body so that he could play like a working class man. So I wonder if there was some kind of innate bias against that look before Arnold Schwarzenegger and everybody came along in the action films of the 80s and really changed that ethos.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that, but I think you're right. It probably is a class thing, which would explain why in 50s and 60s movies and TV shows too, the heroes are often seen shirtless, but they're not muscular. They have no definition. They have pretty normal looking average dude bods.
Right.
They take off their shirts and be like, hey, this could be played by my dad.
So you're saying the 50s was really dedicated to the dad bod?
Oh man, it's all about beefy dads in the 50s. Father knows best when it comes to bodies. There's something I was curious about, because this goes back a little bit to our very first discussion about Team Joel, Team Mike. And there's one joke, and it's just one, so it's not a huge deal, but it kind of reminds me of the sour taste that some later episodes would leave, where very early in the movie, all the characters who are going to talk to the scientist who invented the peaceful death ray are going to meet him. They all get in this crowded elevator. And the line from Crow is, "You use dial. Don't you wish Europeans did?" And that really bugs me. Not because, I'm not, weeping for the besmirched and crushed feelings of Europeans everywhere. I don't need to white knight a continent.
Yeah, but it's a bad move to call a different group of people smelly.
Yeah.
However, I should point out that, and we didn't get to it, but in the last episode, Rocket Ship XM, Tom Servo really makes some not nice comments about Texans.
Now, all's fair in hating Texas. No, that's a fair remark. It's not so much that it would be like cruel or acidic. I don't even mind that at all. It's more that it's cheap, it's low-hanging fruit, and it's just generally kind of boorish to be like, who smells? Other people.
So did you think that they were out of line making fun of some of the actors' faces?
That's like that's really a case by case basis, because you know what, I'm totally cool with Mitchell, which is where the whole team just dog piles on Joe Don Baker, or even worse, like in Ega, where they make fun of Archall Jr., where they call him a Cabbage Patch Elvis. But I think there's an element of creativity there, not only in the writing but also I think it's a fun remark in context, in that Mitchell, more than Joe Don Baker, is like presented as like a totally unappealing lead, as though they're going to undercut that by showing, like the film itself is going to undercut that by showing, yes, but he's so good at his job, or he's this, or he's that. But they never do. He's just an incompetent slob, and you're wondering, why are we following this guy around? And in Ega, which was a vanity project that a father wrote and directed and put his son as like the hunky singing lead, is obviously not Elvis. The movie really wants you to think that he's Elvis. He's the second coming of Elvis. And Archall Jr., from what I understand, is a very lovely guy, but not everybody can be Elvis Presley, and he is less Elvis Presley than most.
Yeah.
So I think that's totally fine, and I think that there are plenty of episodes that comment on an unusual appearance in the actors, or just like unusual characters. And yeah, it's kind of case by case, because there's a number of weird looking guys here, but I didn't find any of them that cruel.
Yes. I didn't feel like I needed to be offended on anyone's behalf, I guess. It just seemed really tame. Like the main villain, they say he looks very froggy, and they make a lot of ribbit noises. I kind of found it funny. I don't know if I should be more sensitive to that.
No, I also found it funny, and I believe the same guy. They make a number of André the Giant references and describe him as like the love child of André the Giant and Michael Caine.
Which, I mean, like, that's classic. If they made it stuff, that's classic comedy.
Yeah.
So, were you an André the Giant fan? Were you into WrestleMania?
A little bit, but in my day-to-day life, I definitely know somebody who looks more like André the Giant than the guy in this movie, and that is my brother Harry. My brother is a musician. He's like 6'9".
Wow.
And and bears a uncanny resemblance to the wrestler and Princess Bride star. So much so that to promote various bands that he was in, are you familiar with Shepard Fairey's André the Giant Has a Posse, or his revised version of that, which is just a close-up of André the Giant's face that says "Obey"?
I am.
Yeah, there's even I think a reference to it in the episode where André the Michael Caine is firing at Bart Fargo on his boat. You can hear Tom Servo just go "Obey" really quietly in the background.
Oh, wow, that's a deep cut.
Yeah, and well, here's the thing: to promote his band, my brother had stickers done up that is his face and just says Harry Clark Has a Posse. And these were posted all over town. But I looked it up. I was just kind of curious because I knew about Obey, and I knew about Harry Clark Has a Posse. I knew about André the Giant Has a Posse. And either I knew this and forgot, or just plain never knew that those were created by a guy named Shepard Fairey, a designer and artist. And the very first one, the André the Giant Has a Posse, and then Obey as well, were just kind of put up as a goof, although he later wrote a manifesto about the meaning of Obey and its philosophical intentions, which, again, there'll be a link to that in the show notes. But later on in his career, he designed the iconic Obama Hope poster. That's him.
That's right. Yeah, okay. It's all coming together.
Yeah, to this day, my brother has not run for office, but I suspect it will just be a photo of him in the exact same red and blue, but it just says Harry. Harry Clark, 2018.
Watermelon Man.
Adam, Mike and the Bots kept comparing the soundtrack to Watermelon Man. Are you a Herbie Hancock fan?
Yes, I'm a Herbie Hancock fan, though his discography is so far-reaching with the jazz and funk albums that he put out, as well as the movies that he scored, that I haven't even come close to hearing half of his discography.
I should mention my knowledge of Herbie Hancock extends to the beginning of Tommy Boy, where Tommy is finishing his last exam in university, and they ask him a question about one of the founding fathers, and it's blank Hancock, because apparently that is a university level question, and he writes in Herbie.
I did not know that. There's a piece of music in Danger Death Ray that sounds suspiciously like the single off of Herbie Hancock's first album, which is called Taken Off in 1962, Watermelon. Now, already, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and assume that people less familiar with the song or less familiar with Hancock are kind of cringing a little bit at that title, as I certainly did when I read it. And what's interesting about it is that Hancock goes into that in his autobiography, Possibilities. He talked about how the melody of the song was inspired by this wagon that would come by in his neighborhood for a guy who used to sell watermelons. And he was really uncertain about releasing a song with that title because he was like extremely embarrassed, and yet it was a childhood memory. So Hancock, who kind of portrays himself as someone who had to learn how to be more emotional and empathetic as he got older and would really focus on like how things were constructed and how to build things, he kind of dissected the concept and asked himself, and this is how he describes it in his autobiography, is there anything wrong with watermelons? Is there anything wrong with a man who likes them? The answer to both is no, and I'm not going to let the fact that racists have turned the act of enjoying a watermelon into a derogatory thing about black people. The song is going to be called Watermelon Man, I Don't Care. And I even believe that a version of that explanation was in the sleeve notes for the original LP and is probably like on the CD release as well.
That's really interesting. So he was anticipating a blowback and was trying to explain his thinking about it. Kind of an example of how you could do a press release without an actual PR manager.
Yeah, and I also think like it shows, I think, an unusual amount of like thoughtfulness, and like because most of the time when perhaps that is a calculated PR move on its own, like people just release something and then apologize later. That seems to be the culture we're in right now. But like this obviously like weighed on him and thought it would be best to release it with explanation. And if that helped, I can't say for certain, but there doesn't seem to be, like, I didn't note any controversy. And later on, Jon Hendricks, a jazz musician, released a version of the song with added lyrics. So while the Herbie Hancock instrumental is better known, hearing Crow go, Watermelon Man, is definitely an imitation of Hendricks.
Okay.
But yeah, later on, Hancock would re-record a version of Watermelon Man for his best album, I think, called Headhunters, and definitely like the first place you should stop if you want to get into Herbie Hancock. This version is drastically different, though, because it was reimagined with a African whistle called the Hindahoo.
Hindahoo.
Hindahoo. It's both fun to play and fun to say. So I imagine that with a career that spans decades, Herbie Hancock, if you see his discography, it might seem a little intimidating. So what I would recommend is actually starting with either album that has a version of Watermelon Man on it. Personally, I'd recommend Headhunters, which has the aforementioned Hindahoo version, or his first album, Taken Off, which has two fantastic tracks, the aforementioned Watermelon Man in its original form and The Maze. Hancock was a musical innovator, and he would get inspiration from even the kind of things that musicians would turn their noses up at. Like, one of the things that brought him to make Headhunters was seeing the Pointer Sisters, whom you may remember for the Neutron Dance, going to a live show of theirs, and all of his fellow band members at the time were extremely, like, snooty about it. But he was in awe of the fact that they could play music while roller skating on stage. And this, believe it or not, inspired him to start tinkering and pushing himself creatively even further. Though, to my knowledge, Hancock has never donned a pair of roller skates.
Hey, Chris, have we received any kind of wonderful letters, like children's letters to Santa being delivered in Miracle on 34th Street, up in your producer's booth?
We haven't yet, but we have received a random listener question. So Beth and Adam, longtime fan of the show and patient listener, Jeremy writes in to ask, if you had a satellite, what would it be a satellite of?
It's very tempting to say satellite of hate. It really is. But if I had a satellite of anything, I would like it to be ominous, and so I would like it to be a satellite of doom.
I would like a satellite of witty comebacks and clever entendres. That would make it easier for me to do this podcast.
Satellite of singers.
But because we were talking about satellites at the beginning of this, which I don't think our listener would have known about, I was thinking about all the old channels that I wish I still had access to. And one of them was the Disney Channel, which was incredible in the 90s. It showed everything. Like, you could have back-to-back Indiana Jones movie followed by Roger Rabbit. Like, it was incredible.
So basically, you would like a satellite of 90s satellite TV channels.
It depends on what concept of satellite we're going with.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, or if you'd like to ask Beth and Adam a random question, get in touch with us. Email us at info@itsjustashow.com, visit our website at itsjustashow.com, or we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to help us identify Bart Fargo's cherry red car, or see just how slutty Adam's glamour shot really was, you'll find links in our show notes at www.itsjustashow.com/episode/2. Okay, Beth, Adam, so I was at this party the other day, and I saw this death ray just sort of sitting there unused, and I thought, oh, I know what peaceful purpose I could use this for, so I drove off with it, tinkered with it, and added a big random button, so either it's going to pick your next movie or it's going to burn a hole in the Sagrada Familia. So let's see. Oh, hey, it's another movie with a weird scene by a pool. Season 4, Episode 4, Teenagers from Outer Space.
Ooh. Beth, do you remember anything about this episode?
I think I'm confusing it with the episode where teenagers get really big and terrorize a town.
Oh, Village of the Giants.
Yeah. No, I don't remember anything about this one. Except maybe, something's coming back to me. Upside down triangle outfits.
I think the things I remember most from this episode would be a tie between lead bad guy pronouncing the word torture as torture, and I believe the teenagers from outer space, the evil ones, unleash a monster to retrieve Derek, our lead. And it's just a photo-negative image of a lobster.
All right, on that note, we'll see you next time, everybody.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I hope you all join us next time. And I guess at this point, we'll have gone live, and all of our embarrassing thoughts and word garbles will be for the entire world to take part in.
Yes, we look forward to all of your emails saying, I hate Beth Martin's new books.
See you guys next time.
See ya. Hindahu?
Hindahu. Hindahu.
Hindahu.